So I'm wearing tonight a jersey that is very special to my heart. I posted about a couple of weeks ago. It was my birthday, and I received this wonderful gift, and I was just blown away. Because if you know about jerseys, you know jerseys are not cheap, especially ones that feature great players. And so I never had an authentic jersey of Cal Ripken Jr., but I was presented this gift and from the Ramp Church team. And when I was blown away. I couldn't believe it, because growing up, Cal Ripken Jr. was my hero in the world of baseball. For all kinds of different reasons. So I'm wearing this because I believe the jersey has a message in it that I'm going to give you tonight, but also for Father's Day, it's a way of honoring my own father, my own dad, who came just a few weeks ago and preached here at Ramp Church, because I'm an Orioles fan, not only because I was born in Baltimore, but because he's an Orioles fan. And I'm a Cal Ripken Jr. fan, not just because of Cal Ripken Jr., but he's a Cal Ripken Jr. fan. And so I want to say, first and foremost, fathers, your values matter, your passions matter, and what you are fixated on, your children will become fixated on. And I love this scripture in Proverbs where the writer of Proverbs says to his son, "Son, give me your eyes." And a few men's ramps ago, I preached on that text, "Son, give me your eyes." And it makes me want to say, Lord, I want to live a life where I can say to my son, "Give me your eyes. Watch me. And I'm going to lead you to Jesus." And so that's a charge and challenge for all of us, to make sure our passions, the things that we're excited about, are godly things, so it's the things we're passing down to our children. So let me tell you the story behind this jersey. As I said, Cal Ripken Jr. played for the Baltimore Orioles, 21 seasons, I think it was. And just an incredible player, won MVP in the MLB, a couple of seasons, won Rookie of the Year, 1983. 1982, he won Rookie of the Year. Whenever he was early on in his career, the Orioles went on to win the World Series in 1983. He played all the way to 2001. So he had just an amazing career. But it's not necessarily his batting average or the other awards that he's most known for. Cal Ripken Jr. is most known for the Iron Man Award. It's not officially called the Iron Man Award. That's just the name that he's been given, the Iron Man, because Cal Ripken Jr. holds the record for the most consecutive games ever played in Major League Baseball. Prior to that, it was held by Lou Gehrig, and then Cal Ripken Jr. in 1995 broke his record with 2,131 games played in a row without missing one. Just do the math. That's from 1982 all the way until 1995. Did not miss one game. Showed up every single day with a passion to be in the lineup, to play on the field, to be a contributor to his team. So why am I talking about this? Is this just some kind of random sports message because it's Father's Day and I'm doing that? No, I actually wasn't even planning to preach this message tonight. Then this afternoon kind of got into this little vein. It was like, wait a minute, I think there's something over here for dads and for Ramp Church. And it has to do a little bit with the dream stream. So let me go back to 2007, because in 2007, I had a dream about Cal Ripken Jr. And I had this dream, I think, again, not necessarily just because he's my favorite baseball player, but because his life, or his career rather, holds a word for us. So go back to 2007. It's in the spring of 2007, either April or May. It could have been June, but I think it's April or May of 2007. I just got married. It was within the first 4 months of our marriage, first couple of months of me and Delana's marriage. We were living in a house. We only lived there for 4 months. On Whippy Drive was the name of the road here in Hamilton. So we're living on this road, and I wake up one morning, and just before I woke up, I had two dreams back to back about Cal Ripken Jr., that he visited the ramp, and he was speaking at the ramp. And like in the dream, it was impacting me so much. I was like, man, my boyhood hero, he's visiting the ramp and he's preaching the ramp. This is amazing. And I wake up from the dream so inspired by this dream that I'm like, his life carries a message for us. And it's the Iron Man thing. It's about the faithfulness. It's about keep going. And, don't let adversity keep you back. I mean, to play every single game for, 12, 13 years and beyond. His streak in playing didn't end in 1995. It went on to 1996. No, 1998, until he chose to take a day off, and not make the whole team about him and his streak in the games, but to make it about the good of the team. So anyway, so I wake up and I'm so inspired by this dream. And after I have the dream, later that day, Delaney and I go to Tupelo to visit my youngest sister. So I have two younger sisters. Abigail is the one closest to me in age, and then the youngest is Elisa. So we go visit my sister Elisa in Tupelo, and when we go, she takes us to a bookstore we'd never been to before. And now again, that morning I woke up from two back-to-back dreams about Cal Ripken Jr. coming and speaking at the ramp. I go later that day to visit Elisa. She takes us to a bookstore we'd never been to before. And when we get there, we're just walking around, doing what you do at a bookstore, kind of moseying about. She runs up to me, holding a book, and she says, "Micah, look what just came out." This book written by Cal Ripken Jr. Now, you're not reacting the way I thought you would react, because I was blown away. I mean, I had just had these two dreams about Cal Ripken Jr. I journaled about it. I'm excited about it. I go that day not knowing that Cal Ripken Jr. had just written and released a book. I show up. She goes, "Micah, look what just came out. It's available today." I told the Ramp Church team the other day, I was like, my body almost went numb. It was, you can't see it because of the glare. Okay, the glare. All right, let me get the, so it's a picture of Cal Ripken Jr. like this. Cal Ripken Jr. And the title of the book is Get in the Game. And it's 8 elements of perseverance that make the difference, okay? Because his number is 8, obviously. So, like the books he writes has 8 principles all the time. So, anyway. So, she shows me this. I see Cal Ripken's face. My body just about goes numb. And I'm like, I've got to buy that book right now. I went back and I looked and I realized, because she said this book is just now available, I realized, no, it was written like right before I had the dream. April of 2007 is when this book was published. And so I get the book, and I immediately start jumping in, and I start just hearing from the Lord from the book. Now, the whole book is great. Lots of baseball stories, leadership principles, all this stuff. Because Cal Ripken was not only an amazing baseball player, but he also navigated to becoming a successful businessman. So a lot of little leagues, there are different kind of little leagues out there. There's the little leagues, there's Babe Ruth League, Cal Ripken League. So there's a lot that Cal Ripken's legacy is bigger than just his records in baseball or his wins or anything like that. He has a larger legacy than that. So the principles are good. The business principles are good. However, just the preface of the book, it just exploded in me, because he begins by talking about his streak of 2,131 games when he broke Lou Gehrig's record. Now, he picks up at the beginning of the book talking about the All-Star game in 1998, or maybe it was 96. Anyway, somewhere in there, it was right after Derek Jeter became the shortstop for the New York Yankees. So Derek Jeter was only a couple of years into his career, and he's standing there beside Cal Ripken. So Derek Jeter is 24 years old at this point, around 24. Cal Ripken's around 38. So in baseball world, obviously 38 is not that old, but in baseball world, Cal Ripken Jr. is like the veteran, been there a lot of seasons. Derek Jeter is the young guy, and there's a lot of similarities between them, especially at the beginning of their career. And so Cal Ripken Jr. is there. They're hanging out the All-Star game, watching the home run derby happen. And Derek Jeter asked Cal Ripken Jr., he said, "Man, Cal, how did you do it? Like, how did you break the streak, Lou Gehrig's streak? I mean, 2,131 games, and at that point, the streak was still going." He was like, "How do you keep, like, what's your secret?" He said, when Derek Jeter asked me that question, I stood there for a moment. He said, I knew he was looking for some kind of secret formula. He said, I knew he was looking for something like really smart sounding, really profound. He's like, I knew he was looking for some kind of trick. And he said, but I had no idea what to say. I just looked at him. I said, Derek, I just play. He said, Derek looked at him confused, like, no, that can't be it. And the moment I read that, the Lord spoke to me so clearly through Cal Ripken's life about this heart for God, this heart for obedience, this heart for ministry and family that there's not this secret sauce and formula. It's just, you just show up, you just play. You just love God. You just keep doing it. And Cal Ripken basically said, I know he was looking for something more profound, but it was nothing more than just, I don't know, Derek, I just love the game. And he goes on to describe, I couldn't imagine taking a day off. Not that you shouldn't take a day off, like rest. That's not what I'm saying. He's like, I couldn't imagine not playing a game. What do you mean, what's my secret? I don't know. Why would I want to do anything else? And then he went on to explain a few pages later. He said, in 1995, I was getting ready to break Lou Gehrig's streak. And, it was a big, if you ever seen any kind of old videos or picture of it, it was there in Camden Yards, which is the ballpark for the Orioles, best place on earth beside the ramp. And it really is. So they had displayed on the scoreboard the numbers of the games he was playing, 2,129, 2,130, And every game they would drop down the other number to show how many games he's doing. And he tells in the book, he said, it was crazy, he said, because everyone began to just rally around me. He was like, it was like nationwide. The closer I got to breaking that record, the more people got invested. He was like radio shows and television shows, and it was crazy. And he said, and I was thinking about it, I was like, man, what was it? What was it about my streak that captured the nation's heart? What was it? And here's what he said. He said, what I realized was this. When they looked at my life and my career, they saw something that reminded them of the purity of the game. Before it was about the big contracts, before it was about the big money, before it was about any of that, just show up and play ball. Because what happened the year before 1995, in 1994, there was a strike, not like a strike, balls and strike, but a strike from the Players Association because the ball players and the owners couldn't come to agreement about salary caps, all that kind of stuff. And actually, they didn't even have a World Series in 1994 because the players went on strike, and it kind of shut down all of baseball for a little while, went into the 95 season. He said, so coming out of that distaste of 1994, and then here 95, they see this guy who just shows up to work every day just because he loves the game. There was something about that was nostalgic, and it reminded people that you can do what you do simply for the purity of why you love it, and you keep doing it. And so I had that dream, I get this book, and I read it, and I know, again, that it's more than just a personal word, though it is a massive personal word for me, that it's a word for the ramp, because in the dream, Cal Ripken Jr. was speaking at the ramp. What is the word for us? Guys, let's just keep showing up. And keep going after God. And day in, day out, He's the passion of our lives. He's what we want. He's the one we're going at. And it's not about the stuff, and it's not about the names, and it's not about the show. It's not about the lights, and it's not about the followers, and it's not about the albums, and it's not about the stuff. It's just about, Derek, I don't know, man. I just play. I don't know, I just play. What do you mean, what's my secret? Why would I want to not play baseball? It's baseball. I just keep showing up. And I just keep playing. And something about that, I'm not doing it justice. There's something about that is so gripping to my heart. So I want to show you something else. Richard's here tonight helping me. Isn't that awesome? He's going to bring something out. Hopefully you can see this. I know the glare and stuff. So we're going to lean this up. So I've had this poster since I was a kid. Now, I know there's a lot of stage lights. Can you guys see that? Yeah? Thank you, Richard. So I've had this poster since I was a kid, well, since 95 moving forward, because this is a picture taken the night that Cal Ripken Jr. broke Lou Gehrig's streak. Because once he hit, I forget how many innings you have to play to be considered a full game, but somewhere around the 7th inning or something, boom, the banner rolls down, it's 21-31, and the ballpark at Camden Yards, it erupts in applause. And so he takes a lap around the field, and everybody's clapping, and it won't die down. I mean, we were so amped about this at my house. I have the video, like at my mom's house, we have the VHS recording of that game. And I think we were at church that night or something, so we couldn't watch it live. So we recorded it to watch later, right? I mean, growing up, if you watched the Super Bowl live, you were such in compromise because we always recorded it and watched it later. Always. I mean, that was the thing, is you always kind of, on Super Bowl night, you looked around to see who was there and who wasn't, because if you were really hungry for God, you recorded it and then watched it later. Okay, so anyway, so that night, the night Cal Ripken Jr., we're not missing church that night. We record it so we can watch it later. So anyway, that was a picture of that night. He's waving to the crowd because they're just erupting. And I put this up in my office, and it's hung there for years because it so inspires me with what it says. Okay, number one, just the picture of Cal Ripken Jr., just the purity of the game. Showing up, there he is. He can't ignore him. He's just looking straight at me. And I had a position where I look at I'd be working at my desk. I look up, and he's just looking at me like. So I can't do anything else. Then watch this. And then especially, and I may cry saying this, because especially on the hard days, I would look at this poster. And I would look at him, and then over the top of his head, what does it say? Perseverance. Perseverance. And then the definition, I don't know if you can read it from where you are, the definition that it has under him: to continue a course of action in spite of difficulty, opposition, or discouragement. The second definition: remain steadfast. So the days where I was facing internally difficulty, opposition, or discouragement, what would I do? I'd look up at that poster, I would remember the dream, and I would remember that it wasn't just a dream, that I went to a bookstore later that day, and boom, my sister hands me a book of Cal Ripken Jr. that he'd just written, just released. And I would just look at that and say, God, that's what you've called me to be. Lord, I don't want to bail out. I want to continue a course of action in spite of difficulty, opposition, or discouragement. I want to remain steadfast. And there's something about that. But it's not just that. It's not that he just showed up and did what he loved to do. There was a loyalty thing about it where Cal Ripken Jr. and Derek Jeter both, and like other guys like Chipper Jones for the Braves, I love guys that never changed teams. There was something about that like gripped my heart. Because Cal Ripken Jr., he grew up 30 minutes from Baltimore. His dad played in the Orioles organization, in the minors. His dad went on to become a manager for the Baltimore Orioles. Then he gets drafted, and as a kid, Cal Ripken Jr. was a bat boy for the Orioles. Then after that, he gets into the minors, and then watch this. There's so much to say. So I'm getting into all the details. But he gets with this team, and he just doesn't go anywhere. And listen, okay, I know this is probably not appropriate, just because it's like a personal frustration thing. But it's Father's Day, so humor me with the sports talk just a bit. So, to say I am so disturbed by the pro athlete culture today is an understatement. Like, I'll turn on the NBA and I'm like, they play for what team? Because it is such a shuffle of where's the next big contract, and there's no sense of loyalty. The only loyalty that we see displayed is a loyalty to themselves. And so it's disturbing to me. Actually, it's like a thing now that for a lot of pro sports jerseys, if you purchase someone's jersey, there's this deal now where you can turn it back in next season to get their updated team, because chances are if they're a good player, they're going to keep changing teams every season because they're going to keep looking for where the big contracts are. So that's why when I get a dream about Cal Ripken Jr., somebody who stayed faithful, stayed loyal, he was an incredible player, all-star player, inducted into the Hall of Fame around 2007, I believe, or 2006, right before this book was released. 2007. So the same year this book was released, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I mean, incredible player, Hall of Famer, but he stays with one team. And it makes me say, man, you know what kind of dad I want to be? You know what kind of leader I want to be? I want to be a Cal Ripken Jr. that just keeps showing up. And if I had a title for this message, which I do, it's this: just keep showing up. Dads, what do? You just keep showing up. You just keep showing up, and you're there, and you may or may not feel like you're the best dad on the earth. You may not feel like the best husband. You may not feel like the best. What do? You just keep showing up. Because here's the thing about Cal Ripken Jr. as well. though he's an incredible player, I mean, obviously like 3,000 hit club, he's into all this stuff. And like I said, Rookie of the Year, won MVP of the whole MLB twice. He's got the stats to back it up, but he was not really necessarily like the spectacular player. Does that make sense? Like, he's not the one that's going to be out there just cranking out home runs and winning home run derbies. It's not the spectacular flash that made Cal Ripken Jr. It's that he just didn't quit showing up. He says in his book, he said, I had such a passion for the game. He said, I wasn't going to assume that my job was secure. So he said, whenever someone new got on the team and they were going for my position at shortstop, he said, it didn't matter how long I'd been there. He said, when we were taking grounders in practice, I would stay until they quit. He said, now when I was 38 and I'm out there against 21-year-olds, I paid a price for that. He said, but I stayed on the field taking grounders until they got tired and they left. He said, then I would go into the clubhouse where all the other 20-somethings were hanging out, and I would wait till they would all leave together to go do whatever they're going to do. And he said, and then I would get into an ice bath because my body was aching. He said, but there's no way somebody was going to display a greater level of passion than me for what I was doing. And he never took it for granted. So even when he was going through hitting slumps, he still got with his managers and said, listen, I need to be in the lineup. I need to be on the field. He said other people call that selfishness. He said it wasn't selfishness to me. He said, number one, I wasn't going to sit on the sideline. I wasn't going to sit on the bench. He's like, I've got too much in me to not be on the field. That's why the book's called Get in the Game. He said, secondly, I brought more than just my batting average to the lineup. He said, I brought so much to the field. He was so in love with the game that he would study all the other batters for the other teams. And there were some moments where he knew more about the batters than the pitcher did. And so he would call the pitches. He would give signs to the catcher, who would then give the signs to the pitcher in order to strike somebody out because he knew his opponent inside and out. That's the kind of... And as I'm reading about him, it's like, God, I don't have to be the most flashy. I don't have to be the most spectacular. I want to have a passion for you where I just keep showing up. I just want to keep showing up. Faithfulness, loyalty, commitment, just keep showing up. Now, there's a lot more to say about Cal Ripken Jr. But you okay if we open our Bibles? Okay. I'm just going to read just a few verses and then we'll be done tonight. I want to pray over fathers, but I hope you're hearing the Lord in this. I know it's a lot of other kind of random stuff, but I really hope you're hearing the Lord in this. Just the beauty of faith. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews chapter 3, then we may go backwards to Numbers chapter 12, and then look at a verse in Proverbs, and then we'll see after that. So kind of hit each of these, and I don't plan to linger long at any one of these. Thank you, Jesus. Hebrews chapter 3. Now, the point of this passage is to talk about how amazing Jesus is. That's the real point of this passage, is to describe how Jesus, even though Moses was faithful, Jesus is better than Moses. He is more faithful than even Moses. But in reading this passage, I know the point is to look at Jesus, but I do want to consider Moses right here in Hebrews chapter 3 and what God says about Moses, because when I read it, it makes me want to go, Lord, that's what I want to be. As a dad, as a husband, as a leader, as a disciple, as a whatever, fill in the blank, that's what I want to be. Okay, Hebrews 3, 1 through 6. Therefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our confession, Christ Jesus, who was faithful to him who appointed him. Watch this. As Moses also was faithful in all his house. It says this statement about Moses that he was faithful in all of God's house, and we'll read further. But when the writer of Hebrews wants to talk about the faithfulness of Jesus, he uses the faithfulness of Moses as an example to talk about the faithfulness of Jesus. How amazing is that? That Moses was so faithful that God could use him as an example to talk about his own son, Jesus, in his faithfulness. Let's keep going. For this one, verse 3, has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses, inasmuch as he who built the house has more honor than the house. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. Watch verse 5. And Moses indeed was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which would be spoken after. Then later, verse 6 talks about Jesus is the son of the own house. Moses was indeed faithful in all his house as a servant. I want that to be written about me and written about you. They were just faithful in the house. And here's what I want to say to fathers especially. Moses was not a perfect man. And I actually really love that the Bible doesn't gloss over the people in the Bible and act like they were perfect in order to be used by God. They are very honest with the faults, with the shortcomings, with the mistakes, with the sins that the people in the Bible made and how God dealt with them in that, and at the same time, continue to use them. And I want to point that out, that Moses was not perfect. In fact, he so stumbled that he didn't go into the promised land. However, just because he wasn't perfect didn't keep God from calling him faithful. And I think as fathers especially, we sometimes wrestle in our minds with this question. If I'm not perfect, how can I still be faithful? Or in other words, we give ourselves permission to stop showing up when we perceive imperfection within us. But I want to tell you, and this is real specific to dads, you are your children's only dad. And if you don't show up, who's going to? Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up with your love and with all that you are and being the voice that God has called you to be in your children's life. In your children's life. Just keep showing up. Like Moses, remain faithful. Now, let me go back to Numbers chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12, and I want to show you something. I'm sure you've read it before, but just to bring it back to your mind, something God said about Moses. Now we know the writer of Hebrews was inspired by the Holy Spirit, so that is something God said, that God said Moses was faithful in all my house. And I want to look at this in Numbers chapter 12. This is an interesting moment where Aaron and Miriam are like complaining about Moses. And they say something interesting. They say, is Moses the only one that can hear from God? Which is interesting, and I'll get into that maybe another time. Because you see the similarity of sort of offense and rebellion in what they said, and you see it also in what Korah said about Moses, like, are we not all called? And there's this weird, twisting of things in order to tear down a leader. Okay, that's something to think about another day. Anyway, Aaron and Miriam, they begin to speak negatively about Moses. And then God, it says that God comes down in a pillar, and he's like, Aaron and Miriam, I'm going to need you to come outside. He literally says that. He says, come on outside. That's not a good day when God's like, I'm going to need you to come outside for us to have a little chat. So Moses, Aaron, and Miriam come outside, and here's what God says in verse 6. Then God said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. Why? Why do you speak to him differently? And as we'll see, face to face as a friend, one man talks to another. Why do you do that? Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. And then God says, I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, for he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? In other words, it's like God saying, hey, listen, you've got complaints against Moses? I do too. But at the end of the day, he's faithful in my house. There's something about that makes me want to say, God, let that be said of me. I just want to be faithful in your house. I don't have to have the record for most home runs in a season. If you just use me to hit a few singles and whatever it looks like, God, I just want to be faithful in the house. I just want to keep showing up. I just want to have a passion and a faithfulness that doesn't stop because things get hard. I want to remain steadfast. I don't want to back up. One more scripture out of Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20. I think it's chapter 20. Yeah, verse number 6. This is one of those verses, Proverbs 20, verse 6, that haunt me in a good way. It's one of those verses that it's like kind of always in the back of my mind. And it's one of those verses that's like, it asks a question. And within my heart, it makes me want to say, God, I want my life to be a response, to be an answer to this question. I want my life to be an answer to this question. Proverbs chapter 20, verse number 6. Most men will proclaim each his own goodness. And then the second part. But who can find a faithful man? That question. Everyone loves to talk about themselves and present, best foot forward. But who can find a man that just keeps showing up with purity of heart, with passion for God and for what he's called them to do? Who doesn't bail out when things get tough? Now, trust me, there are stories, if you ever read the book, Get in the Game, there are moments where Kyrie could have taken a day off. Slightly injured, bit strained. But he didn't pamper himself and say, thanks, guys, I'm going to sit this one out. He just, why would I do it? Why would I do that? I so love what's in front of me. I so love what's in front of me. I gotta be there, I gotta be faithful. So that question, Proverbs 20, verse 6, who can find a faithful man? That is a question that's still resounding in the earth right now. And I want to encourage you to make your life an answer to that question. It didn't say who can find a perfect man. We know that Jesus is the only perfect man. But even in the midst of our own imperfections, we can still be faithful. We can keep showing up. We can keep doing the thing that God has called us to do.